have you done for me lately? It's Coons. What have y'all done for us lately? And if there's no answer, the only thing we owe them.
Hey, good evening. Welcome to Let's Talk 2. And tonight is Tuesday night, and every Tuesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern, we have Sister Azima joining us to impart and give us some of her wisdom, history, and give us some, and I hate to use this word for her because she has never said it herself. Give us some of her elder conversation, for lack of better words. Good evening, everyone. Brown Girl Boston, good evening, Drea. What's going on?
Mm-hmm.
Good evening. Who was that just
Pride
now?
of St. Louis, yeah.
Yeah, the Pride of St. Louis.
The
This,
trifecta.
hey, Rodney, what's going on? Peace, bro. The topic of this discussion is the Pride of St. Louis. Um, we have two congresswomen, excuse me, and one former congresswoman. Just put their pictures up there. Maxine Waters, uh, Jasmine Crockett, and the former Congresswoman Cori Bush, representative, however y'all want to say it. So our conversation will be about them, but about the pride of St. Louis in general and the significance of St. Louis and the history of St. Louis. We have as we would say, as Chef C would say, somebody literally from the soil of St. Louis, knows the history, understands the history, understands the landscape, understands the impact that this city has had, not just on America as a whole, but what we consider Black America. Because a lot of us don't know the history when you speak about things that have happened in this country, definitely with atrocities. Most people say Rosewood, most people say Tulsa or Watts or the riots during the King era, but a lot of people leave out St. Louis, East St. Louis, and specifically that. And Sister Azima has, like I said, she's not only an elder that's from that soil, she has a very, very rich, wealthy history, and she knows her history. And we've never really did a show to focus on her history, but she will be able to share some things with us tonight. Sister Azima, what's going on?
I'm trying to suppress a laugh. Good evening, everybody. Oh, we have the trifecta. I don't know if that's a good sign or a bad sign. Well, we know, right? Jasmine Crockett. I'm not here to really talk poorly about them. I don't want to expend that kind of energy. But we've had important things. Meacham Park. There is a park named after my father, the Kennedy Park. There, Banneker helped us build our riverfront that we know now. Not necessarily the arch, but the stair step embankment that we have there, so that the levee system came in with that. We based on what my grandfather told me and my parents, and historically, many of black children were educated on the river. Therefore, they could not be denied the right to learn to read or write. You could not read or write in the state of Missouri. The Mississippi River is not a part of the state of Missouri. So they could use the boats out there, and they would get out there and learn to read and write. The key thing is that St. Louis has always been pivotal. The Dred Scott case, um, we've had a pivotal history in what goes on in the greater part of St. Louis. Like I said, there's Benjamin Banneker. Slavery was here because we were part of the slave states. Um, we are upriver of New Orleans. We've always had a black um, aristocracy. We've had free merchants and professionals that have always existed since 1850 here. So we've had pharmacists that were here. We've had lawyers, congressional representatives that were here. So I've never known my city not to have a footprint. We are the only city that I am aware of that's has created its own county seat. So that means that the airport belongs to the city and all of the surrounding counties and townships, even though they sprang up, at one time it was clear that they would have to pay some type of monetary stipend in order to use the name St. Louis because, we were founded for Saint Louis from France. Um, we were a city that always had an opportunity for black people to work in any industry. Outside of farming, we worked as butchers and cattlemen. We worked in the mine fields. We're one of the largest lead mining industries here, and coal mining. So we did that. Black people were there. It was almost, I would say, 1 to 1 or close to 2 to 1. It's never been an overwhelming situation of just white people could radically outnumber us. That has never been the case. We have always been a port of entry because we do sit on the water. But many of your pharmaceutical companies are here. Bayer, Monsanto, Mallinckrodt, um, 76, Shell Station, Exxon, they're right across the river. We've always had the ability to produce whatever we needed because we are centrally located, not just in the United States, but I found out we are centrally located around the world. So we are now known as the intermodal district of the world. What that means is that if you wish to, if you're in California and you want to ship something to Germany, the first place you want to send it from is St. Louis because it's equal distance to Europe and any place in Europe, even to China and any place to the West. So we are the intermodal district of the world. And we've been able to do that. We've always had black people that have been very innovative and creative. Um, and the best part about that is that we've had historically black schools named after Meacham, Banneker, Turner, um, Sumner, Vashon. We've always known that. There was never a time in my life I didn't know something about the history of our people. So I think that helped me. It really helped formulate how I looked at things. And we've never been a state, even though we were part of the South, right at the Mason-Dixon line, we were never a state where we would surrender.
Mm.
We are the show me state. So I can't be a slave. Show me why. I can't be free. Show me why. you know, we've always been that way, and we've had enough of our people to be intellectually intelligent. Harriet Beecher Stowe School, Harris Stowe School is here. So we've had a college, we've had a middle school. Well, you call it a middle school, but we had college, high school, and elementary right here, named after Black people all of our lives. We didn't have to go out and build a school and change the name or get a school and change the name. I've never seen that. Okay. We have an equal number of important Black people and non-important Black people buried in some of the biggest cemeteries, Bellefontaine, um, Bellevere, and then um, Fontaine Cemetery, the two largest cemeteries. Then we have Valhalla and um, the St. Peter Cemetery. We are a city surrounded by not only water, but by cemeteries. We had an active role in the Civil War. So I have always been proud of being in St. Louis. It's always been a tough city growing up as a youngster. It's been a tough, I want to say a very realistic, straightforward city to live in. Okay. Um, if there were no white people on the bus, Black folks sat at the front. No big deal. If a white person got on the bus and there was only one person, they didn't mind sitting next to you. It wasn't where you had to get up and go to the back. It was only when there would be a wave of them to come on the bus. Okay. We've had great horsemen here, great trolleys. We've had Black firefighters. I don't I don't I don't feel what Black people from the deep South may have felt. We've never had to hang our head down. We may not have been verbally accosted, accusatory, mouth off at white people, but we didn't bow our head when we talked to them.
Mm.
And they knew exactly where to draw their line. So I always felt relatively safe in my community, okay, being around my own people and realizing and then understanding exactly what goes on. So going to Turner was a wonderful place. I never went to Sumner High School, but I went to Vashon, the whole history of Vashon. And then, my sister attending Harris Stowe. All right. And then it's just me attending Missouri U. So you knew racism. We knew that prejudice existed, but we also knew respect. Black people were really given a lot of respect. Then there was a time period when it all changed. And I
Mm.
think there was a time period when, as a collective body of people of color, we had come to a place where civil rights wasn't enough. We wanted autonomy of ourselves. We wanted to speak for ourselves and think for ourselves. We wanted to have greater autonomy over our financial needs and the needs of our families and our communities. Somewhere in that time frame, those of us that were seeking that meant you had to leave the communities you grew up in. And then leaving that community left a void. And that is where you began to see the cities break down. Now, it was systemic, don't get me wrong, it was semi-planned. And I say that because in the 70s through the early 90s, so many Black people were moving away from, people of color were moving away from what we consider the projects. Okay. In our case, the projects that were built in our Black neighborhoods were built for Black people who worked at the hospitals to have a close proximity to their jobs so they could walk to their jobs, and the ability to live reasonably. And so the housing, the mass production of housing, which we call public housing, came about. Our city was not planned. I don't know about New York or Boston, but St. Louis did not have a city planner. And so you could have a mansion next door to a shack, and it was not uncommon, and it was not out of place. And that would be down in what we call our downtown area. Anything above what we call the center line of the city now, but it was called the outskirts of the city, and that was Jefferson Avenue, later known as 12th Street. You were considered at the edge, and anything beyond that became the big houses of the merchants and the middle class people. They could build these 3-story brick homes. As we moved out of the projects, we moved into the 3-story brick homes. um, we rented them at first, and then we began to purchase them. Now, think back now, I'm talking about the 70s and 80s. A brick house, because I lived in one, it had 13 rooms, 3 stories, sat on the corner.
Wow.
It had a detached garage, red brick, and the bottom of the house was all stone, the white stone, limestone. And of course, you had to treat the limestone, but it was worth $10,000. That's a lot of money back in those days when you were making $1.25 an hour. That was top dollar. Everybody else made 65 cents an hour. So there was no such thing as getting a loan from the bank. Families pooled their money, or you made monthly payments. There was no interest. You just made your monthly payment, and boom, you had your place. Okay. So for me, St. Louis has always been a jumping off point. There was a time in my life I felt that as I went on to college and did some other things, I, like many folks, the young Simbas, that's what I call them, you're getting out here, you're going to make a name for yourself.
Young
Um,
Simbas.
yeah, and like Miss Jasmine Crockett, she's trying to make a name for herself, but she's going to be used. The same way with Cori Bush, she got used, but she didn't realize she was being used. Or if she did, she didn't know how to step away
Mm.
from all of that. Okay. The things that benefited me was the fact that my father had been the head of a labor union, textile workers union. For 25 years, he had been the only Black man to be head of that union. So I say that is because it was predominantly white union, and they voted him in.
Mm.
So racism didn't exist. Prejudice did, but not racism. Um, and then he went on and went into politics. He was kind of forced into it. All of those things laid a foundation for our family to be humble, to not be arrogant or superstitious, where we felt like we're better than everybody else. I felt, at one time, I felt that the majority of my people did not, the majority of Black people or people of color, they had come into a slump, and they did not want to learn. They went almost brain dead, and they didn't want to learn. They did not feel happy learning. And I think that was because we were going into desegregation, and the Black children had to come away from places that felt comfortable and familiar into uncharted territories. And the people said racism, but the total disregard for our youth created a vacuum or a void where they didn't want to learn because the teachers didn't want to help them because of their prejudices. Or if they wanted to help you, they didn't want to step out of line and lose their job as a white teacher in a white school. So pressure was kind of put up on them. But one thing I can say, black parents in St. Louis don't play. They'd show up at school. They'd bring a truckload, literally. They'd have a truckload of folks show up. They would at every football game, every basketball game. They would show up and we would turn it out and they would have to give our children respect. But it did create that void. That was at a time when I didn't feel happy living in the city proper of St. Louis. There was nothing there. The city also, the city fathers. So let's back up a little bit. As the city was growing and expanding, some people have parishes in some states, and others have council areas. We had wards, and we only had 9 major wards. Good evening. And with those 9 wards, those wards were always controlled by white men, not even white females, but white men known as aldermen. So these aldermen and these 9 wards was shifting. The population was shifting. More and more of people of color were moving into these wards. And they needed to expand because St. Louis became the hub. We had a hand in building the bomb that went to Japan. I'm not proud of that, but we did. um, so
Yeah, y'all had a hand
yeah,
in the A bomb.
yes, and the city began to grow, but we were also deeply involved in building the space shuttles that went into space, the space capsules, and that went into space. So we were deeply involved in that. We were also a major hub for quite a few airlines. Quite a few. Piedmont, you never heard of it, is gone. TWA, and
I
then of
remember,
course
I remember,
United.
I remember Trans World.
Right. So we had that, and St. Louis was also the hub for all unions. Union people loved our city because we were united across the board as union people. We didn't care if you were indigenous population, Indian, people of color, a white person. We always embraced you because you were a human person. Our post office was union. Our automobile industry was union. Our maintenance people were union in the schools. Our teachers were unionized. Our hospitals were unionized. Fire department was unionized. Police department was unionized. Packing houses were unionized. We were a union city. And, we knew how to put our prejudice to the side and work as a solid body to demand what we needed to get. And we often got that. We were not overbearing or greedy. But you did have, that was also the time when you began to have outside entities come into what I consider your stronghold. They'll tell you St. Louis is Chicago is the place to be, but everything passed through our ports. The railroads came through here. The trucking industry came through here. And of course, being on the Mississippi River, all the barges came through here. So business was so good that we had a Wendy's, McDonald's, I want to say Kentucky Fried Chicken boat. Each one of them had a boat on the river. So when you were downtown, you could go on a boat and eat at McDonald's or Kentucky
Every,
Fried.
everyone in the chat, you know, with a comment, tell us what you know about St. Louis. I mean, without googling it or anything, just tell us what you know about St. Louis, and I asked Sister Azima about that specific question, or what you know about St. Louis. I know. I asked Sister Azima before about the Bush family
Oh,
and how they were integral in the city. You want to elaborate on that and talk about the Bushes, right, wrong, and indifferent? It is the history of the city.
I think they were the fourth cousin to President Bush. Came from the family came from the same area. They were well established. And of course, in any family, you do have a generation of children, which would be the grandchild to Anheuser-Busch. That grandchild stayed in trouble, unfortunately. Not in a good way. Thank goodness his children were able to clean that mess up. But they no longer wanted to be in the beer business. Not only did they have the brewery, but they also have Grant's Farm, and it's a nice size farm. We often take children out there from the schools to look at farm animals, to see how crops are grown, um, to not lose sight that we are an agricultural state as well as an
Oh,
industrial state.
oh, you brought up agriculture.
Yeah, well, we are. We were an agricultural state.
Oh,
Corn was our biggest crop next to
Mm.
wheat. Okay, now it's soybean because they use the Roundup, which is not good. It's been a lot of lawsuits. And then, of course, Monsanto got out of it and sold the business to Bayer. Bayer is from the family of the Rothschilds. And the Rothschild just means red shield, but their original name was Bayer, Bayer. So um, we still have areas. If you've ever watched the congressional hearings, you will hear Josh Hawley. I love him. He speaks on the fact that St. Louis City has been a dumping ground of a lot of depleted plutonium, uranium, and other radioactive waste. And
let
when
me
I
ask you:
Mhm.
Josh Halley is from St. Louis,
Yes, he is.
and he represents St. Louis.
He represents the state of Missouri.
Okay. The
He's a
reason why
convert.
the
He's a
reason why the reason why I asked that is because most people don't know that he may be Republican, but he knows how to work across the aisle. He works across the aisle like he's probably one of the foremost people in Congress that works across the aisle, no matter what party you're from, and he knows
yes,
how to get stuff done.
yes. Um, because Missouri was a place where a lot of cases were litigated, we had to learn to put our racial differences aside for the betterment of the whole. We also realized that St. Louis could be a, a wealthy city in the quiet, in the quick, and you wouldn't even know it. Okay. There are, I just found this out recently, there are 350 billionaires. I didn't say 350 billions of billionaires. There are 350 people that are billionaires around the world. St. Louis has 10 of them. And of that 10, four of them are black. You would never know it. Nobody runs around and does a big fanfare about it. Okay. And If you've ever heard of World Web Technology, it's a black man that owns it, him and his son. If you've ever heard of McKinney and Company, that's a black man that owns that. So we have billionaires, people of color. You don't, and they're not always athletes, basketball players, former football players. Many of them, especially in Missouri, come from other areas. They come from technology, they come from agriculture, they come from industry. So we have always been that way. We have we are surrounded by um, a military base right across the water from us, and then we have one midway our city, our state. So there's Whitehall and oh, excuse me. Oh, we have we have a lot of things that we don't talk about. We have a Union Station. Of course, the train comes through the Union Station, but if you go down there now, there's a gigantic Ferris wheel. There's all of this outdoor activity. We are the ones that has we have the Science Center, of course, but we also have um, it's called the City Museum. It was an old shoe factory. We were one of the biggest producers of shoes, so much so that all of the discarded shoes that were damaged or discarded. We also had one of the largest number of feet models, women's whose feet were size 5 or 6, and they would model these shoes. And when they were through modeling these shoes, they would discard these shoes. And what they did is that they discarded the shoes and built a high heel and stuck all of these shoes on there and bronzed it like you would your child's first pair of shoes. And it used to sit out in front of these shoe factories. Um, we are also known for Levine, one of the largest hat makers. And that was, these people made all kinds of hats, the fedora, the box hat. They they were amazing. And to look at it, it was just really one family with the 5 people. They're no longer everyone in the family has passed on. So the hat industry is not down there anymore. We were also being a textile industry. Every fashion item that was made here. These black women were some of the fastest seamstresses I'd ever seen in my life. And they worked in these plants. And at the end of the day, you see these white guys pulling these large racks of clothing, 2 and 3 at a time, across the street. Up until the 1990s, we still had cobblestone, and we still do, but it's covered in asphalt now. But we had cobblestone streets. Okay, we still had
Uh-oh.
horses.
Now,
Yes.
now, now I'm about to start some trouble. Somebody just put a comment, a question up there.
Okay.
This might start trouble.
Okay.
Co, I don't know how I pronounce your name, but I'm gonna just say, Brother Crow. You start in trouble with this one. I don't even want to put it up here, but I'm gonna put it up here.
Okay. Ask her which city has the best barbecue. I'd say Kansas City.
Okay.
I've been to Kansas City. I love their barbecue. It's not too tangy, and there's a undertone of sweetness. St. Louis, now here's the difference. St. Louis's barbecue will fall off the bone. But that sauce in Kansas City, oh, I love it.
Yeah, the can actually in the I know
Mhm,
uh, in the culinary field,
mhm.
the Kansas City rub is so famous. I mean,
Yes.
I go when I go to a supermarket now and I look at all the rubs they sell.
Mhm,
I'm shocked that all these big chain stores got these
mhm,
famous rubs in their
mhm,
stores. I know that Kansas City. Uh, Most people say that Kansas City, New Orleans, St. Louis, they're good. They're known for their fine eating and good food.
Right. So what I'm saying is that, like any city, you have to give and take. I was fortunate that my city was very matter of fact. That's you hear me talk, I always talk matter of fact. And that is because St. Louis, the energy of the city makes you prove your position. You must be able to validate your position. If you can't validate your position, nobody listens to you. We don't be bothered with you. You don't know what you're talking about. And that's the attitude that people take. And even your family members will be that way. They're not that way towards you if you stutter or you may have a physical or learning disability. But if you're one of those people who like to spend all your time, like the real housewives and husbands of these some of these other places, that doesn't. I'm not saying that we don't get, the gooseneck women, the chicken neck women doing all of that. But overall, you must learn to defend your position or state your position clearly. Because as a politician, I'm speaking from the fact that there was a position my father stood on, and a lot of people didn't like it. And it wasn't just the black folks. And they TP'd our house to talk about how you didn't stand on a position that they were interested in. It caught my dad's attention. He decided to relook at some things. He did stand on his position because in the end, they were able to see where he was going with that. But the people here will protest in front of you. As you well know, um, about 4 or 5 years ago, there were some people who went onto a private street and they were marching in front of the mayor's house. She was a white woman. And she was holding a public hearing. Unfortunately, at the public hearing where she had the news media, there were people who came there to speak. She listened to them and inadvertently, although she told everyone, we're going to cut out your name and address, she gave that information somehow live on the air. And then everybody started protesting her because they thought what we were talking about was dealing with the police. And this was at the time Mike Brown and all that was going down. And everybody, black people in particular, were concerned that retaliation would occur. And so they were out there protesting. And if you remember, there was a white couple that came out on their porch to stand their ground and with a gun. They were both lawyers. I had to laugh at that because the mayor lived on the other end of the street. They were at the beginning of the block and she was on the other end of the block. And they walked past them with their sign. They were not like what you see now with the bullhorn and yelling and everything. They were just merely saying, um, they weren't saying even, hell no, this has to go. They were basically saying, we feel unsafe. Our people are unsafe. And it wasn't just black people. There were white people out there. There were some Asian people out there. The mere fact that at that public hearing, she inadvertently, I wasn't attending because I lived in the county at that time. She either inadvertently or accidentally on purpose gave these people's private information and it flashed on the air.
Mm.
And so they were very concerned. And of course, this white couple was going to come out and stand their ground to protect the mayor. And they didn't have to because nobody broke in the mayor's house. Nobody damaged her home. They just merely walked on the sidewalk, stood outside of her house for 20 minutes, and then they quietly left. And that white couple ended up in court, not with a good outcome.
Mm.
So they were fined, and they were given sanctions against them being able. And the funny part was, both of them were lawyers for poor people who couldn't get a lawyer.
Wow.
Okay, they were state defenders, and they were out here doing this, which was really uncalled for. I think they came out to try to bolster their credibility, and it backfired on them.
And also St. Louis is the home of the brown paper bag machine, right?
The who?
The brown paper bag machine.
Yeah, that's my father's invention. Yeah, the paper bag machine. Um, so moving more into that direction, because you have a sense of safety. I'm not going to say that you won't have a run in. You cannot change people's minds. You're going to have prejudice no matter what. Okay. And there was a time they clamped down because we had blue code laws. But, we have Anheuser-Busch here. And he did a lot of stuff with his beer industry. He also brought about competition like Michelob and Coors. But then he ended up owning Coca-Cola, who ended up owning Sprite. That's a little tricky situation there. But anyway, um, we were one of the third largest bottling locations here in St. Louis. So there was always work. Black folks always had work. They either worked at Anheuser-Busch, or they worked for, at that time it was called Laclede Gas or Union Electric, or they worked at the textile industry. Lane Bryant was one of our biggest plus size women industry here. We had the shoe industry here. We had the hat making industry. We were making automobiles. Okay. We were still building houses the old fashioned way with
You
bricks
got
and
you
mortar.
guys in the chat. The conversation, and this is important. I know most people are probably like, well, why is she speaking about St. Louis?
Because we
I-
have the trifecta.
the,
And the trifecta
the-
is that we have Jasmine Brown, Jasmine Crockett, we have Corey Bush, and Maxine Waters.
all
And
three of these black women
mhm,
are from St. Louis,
mhm.
and a lot of times, we should always be proud about where we're from. And I'm gonna play a video that I played for Sister Azima before we went live, you guys. And if you ever listen to Sister Azima when she comes on the show, one of the themes that she always tries to hit home with myself and those of her who are younger is not having a victim mindset, not having a victim mentality, and understanding that what happened, knowing your history does not mean that defines who you are.
Mhm.
From understanding, like we understand everything, but don't. And it's very easy for us to fall into being having a victim mindset, a victim mentality, instead of being a victor. Um, so I'm gonna play this video, and all I'm gonna say is, Sister Azima's, this won't be her first reaction, but the second reaction may be even worse.
The country and educate people about what immigrants do for this country, or the fact that we are a country of immigrants.
Right, right.
The fact is, ain't none of y'all trying to go and farm right now. Okay, so I'm lying. Raise your hands. You're not. You're not. We done picking cotton. We are. You can't pay us enough to find a plantation.
I know that's right.
Mm. She said we are a nation of immigrants, which is totally wrong.
It is wrong.
It's so much there
that you have to
and,
unpack. Yeah.
that you could really talk about in 32 seconds.
Mhm.
That's how long that was.
Mhm.
Um,
So let me ask you all this. Do you think the Democratic Party wants to make her the new face for 2028? She's not old enough. She's 44, so she could run for the presidency. Do you think she's qualified? Do you think she has what it takes to be able to talk to dignitaries around the world? Do you feel that she knows enough, even though she's gone to school to be a lawyer? She went to a private all girls Catholic school. That slang is not necessary. The last time anybody was on a plantation in my family was my grandfather. I'm 75. He's been deceased now for more than 60 years.
Rodney said no.
Okay. So who's talking about plantations? And Cori Bush had her that she didn't say those exact words, but those were her sentiments. And listen to Maxine Water. Trump's going to take everything away from you, which brings me to the Department of Education at the national level. Okay, so let's talk about that. I graduated from high school in 69, graduated out of college in 72. Okay.
There was no Department of Education, right?
There was no affirmative action. There was no DEE. There was no Department of Education. Department of Education came about in 1979.
Rodney, I see your comment, Rodney. Could you elaborate on that?
Please.
Me and Sister Azima both have our own personal opinion that honestly we agree with you, but tell us why you feel that way. It's very important for us to, and I know it's been a lot. We've had conversations about Jasmine Crockett, and I don't never want to make people think that the platform
Mhm.
is to try to attack definitely a black woman or
No.
a black man because that's not the purpose of the platform. But the reason why we talked about the pride of St. Louis is um, we use these phrases. She's literally from the soil that Sister Azima is from.
Mm-hmm.
Sister Azima, as they would say, knew that girl before she knew herself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so all of the history that Sister Azima just shared with us, this stuff, for lack of better words, was embedded with this girl. Her
Right.
father was a minister. And if you notice, when she was speaking at that church, she was speaking like she knew the whole movements was the ministry movements.
Mm-hmm.
So historically, what you know, where you come from, is very important to it shapes your way of thinking.
Yes, it does.
And we sometimes don't understand that
Mm-hmm.
people are going to express their real experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of us have said, Jasmine Crockett, something seems off, something's not right. She's uh started out with this new sister girl persona
Mm-hmm.
that she didn't have when she first jumped on the scene.
Mm-hmm.
And knowing where she's from and knowing someone that's right here on the platform where she's from, she can give us some history about, Jasmine. She must be doing her best acting job right now.
I, I feel, no, I'm going to express what I know. It doesn't matter if you're black, white, whatever. Between the ages of 18 and 29, you're trying to find yourself. That's when you have that veracity. You see it in young white boys. They want to fight, fight, fight between that age. Okay, 18 through 29. They have to prove themselves. No different than black people. No different than indigenous people. That is the formative age that in society, these are the ones that you give the ball to and they run with it. They don't have a direction. And that's why you have a coach that coaches them and gives them instructions from the sideline. The problem is that now, many of them, she's 44 years old, don't want to hear any directions from the sideline. They want to be out here making sure that their voice is heard. She can easily lead other people down down a troubling path with misinformation and inaccurate information. You can be misguided. Learn the Democratic Party, learn their history. They were the Dixiecrats. They gave you the KKK. They're the ones that want you, people of color, to have a victim mentality. They supported the slave Bible. They supported all of the things within organized religion in order to maintain the ultimate goal, and that is control. They only want two types of people: poor people and wealthy people. That's their goal. A kingship and then peasants. We at one time were not the middle class. By the time the 80s came along, many of us were working and we became the middle class. We became the supervisors, the managers, the leads, and all of this within the industry. In every industry, we moved up the ranks. We were the middle class. If you have people, like George Carlin said, you don't have to have racism, but you have people who are like-minded and they have made sure that their children moved up the ranks of society to be in positions of control and authority. And they can just look at each other, like if you're a sorority or a fraternity person, you can look over and go, oh, that's a Sigma girl, that's a Delta person, that's a Kappa person, because you know the energy that they give off, the signature.
The language, the logo, they speak into, as
So
they would say, that people say it but may not understand. You're speaking to my soul. That's because we're aligned with that ideology.
right. So whatever is going on in her, she's the young lioness speaking her voice. Now, just before her, it was AOC. Do you remember her? Alexandria Ocasio Cortez. Remember her? And before that, it was Oman Ilhan. And then it was the Talib woman. Do you remember them?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So she is just one, she's a tool. And either she knows she's a tool or she's being manipulated. The problem is that it doesn't stay long. The only reason why Maxine is where she is because she's in California, and California has taken that hands off whatever their policies are. And she has been able to ride the surf on that. Cori Bush, she got what, a year and she got 2 terms. And then she was replaced with Wesley Bell. So there is a guy in Texas. There are 3 people who are getting ready to run against her. The guys that I saw was Donaldson, ex-vet Republican. There was another gentleman who's a Democrat. And then there's a third person who's an independent. They don't care which one of them wins. They want her off the ballot. Look at that. You got 3 men of color running against her. She's going to get louder and more exaggerated. And she she could be in a bind because right now there are people who are going through um, all of her information as a lawyer and any type of funding that she has received. And they're looking at that because she's been standing on her on her soapbox saying I haven't taken anything from anybody, but now they're able to pull information up and show that she has.
Let me
And
ask you,
yes,
because I know you're a woman that has 5 daughters,
hmm,
a woman that built a beautiful family. Um, you've had a great career in what we would consider mainstream America, as far as
yeah,
a great career. I mean, you worked for NASA. You were privy to information, so
mhm,
you climbed what we would say the corporate ladder, being
of
a black
success, yeah,
being a black woman.
hmm,
And from the outside, for those that don't know, may feel like you would be proud of, for lack of better words, Jasmine as your daughter. This is a daughter from St. Louis. This is somebody that you should be like, okay, I'm proud of her. What are you proud of her, or are you upset with her, or are you disappointed? Are you? What's your feelings towards what she's doing, um, in what you see?
okay. The very first time I was ever privy to seeing her and she started speaking, she lacked professionalism. She doesn't have it. I put her in the same category as Kamala. Kamala Harris has a little more age on her by 20 years, but Kamala herself, they remind me of adult children. And I hate to say that, but that's what they remind me of. Even Cori Bush, even Maxine, they remind me of adult children. They yell the loudest. I don't know if you ever heard the saying, okay, the wagon that squeaks the most gets the oil.
But it's also the first one that gets replaced.
Correct. And so what you see, and Randy and I talked about this. Brother Quentin and I know Randy. Randy told me 5 years ago, he said, Sister Azima, in 5 years, you're going to see the black woman as the face of the destruction of America. I said, no, Randy. He goes, yeah, you will. And that is what we're seeing.
Mm.
We went from being the mother to being the antagonist. We went from being helpful to being hateful. Okay. My values are different than yours. Mm. And it's different than my daughter's. But what I did is I gave my daughter's foundation. I don't even know if Jasmine's family feels that they support her. We don't know. Everything about her is a secret. You don't know if she has family, and you now know that she's not married, that she's single. We don't see anything where her family comes to support her, even though my parents couldn't always get on the grounds where I worked tracking. They would come to see me in Barstow, California, or in Maryland, the state of Maryland, or they would try to get to me in Hawaii. And my mother was clever. She created a tour company. And she would just drop off at my house and, hey, we're here. Okay. But I don't know where, just like with Cori Bush, I don't know where her family stands on supporting her. We don't see that.
You really, now, Sister Azim, I'm never doubting you, but
Hmm,
you really believe what you're witnessing right now?
hmm.
Um, Black women have become the face of antagonism.
Yes. And it was by design. Because if you go back and read um, Agenda 21, and I know y'all are tired of hearing it, and you go back and find out about New World Order. New World Order understood that we, as people of color, didn't matter if you were from India, Iran, or whatever, you had a connection with the earth, the universe, with other people. We had open arms. And after a while, we got tired of having open arms because you knew how to come in there and literally hurt us. You hurt us physically when we were enslaved. And you moved the agenda along. Okay. You realize we were gaining momentum to do a lot of good things like we always do, because we are. I mean, come on, we invented almost every, and I hate to be braggadocious, but there's a lot of things we invented. Okay. And we're still inventing. But you'll never hear about us being the inventors. There are a lot of white people who want to recognize that, but the institutions of education, because there are 7 pillars to making a society, and they have taken all 7 of those pillars and applied them against us. So when you're looking at that, and don't get me wrong, these industrial complex people, these corporations and these entities, or what I call oligarchies, they, all that stuff I talked about, vibrating and everything, they go and look at that and they take that seriously because it produces an energy and they need to be in control of that energy. So how do you control that energy? You see where the energy is going, what groups of people are producing that energy at whatever frequency or level, and then you create the schisms. And how did they do that? They started killing. They first, when it was Vietnam, they took all the young black men and told them, you can't go to college because you had a college exemption. So they took them, put them in Vietnam, and a lot of them came back unprepared to be back in society. Then what did you do? You shut down all the places where they could get psychological help. And you put them on the street and you get them on drugs, and then you put them into the prison system and had free slave labor. Many of them finally got out, and we saw, you know, you've seen it, so-and-so in jail 30 years on charges that didn't exist. And, you know, the freedom folks came and got him out, and which is wonderful. But 30 years of his life is gone. He is now 60 something. Okay, he can never capture that back. If you've been confined for 30 years, it's very hard for you to get back into the social structure of society. So they come out unprepared. The families, most of your family is gone. Your friends are gone. Okay, so the next wave of that is when we started having all the killing of the young boys. Mike Brown, you know, Trayvon Martin, and you're going, and even, you know, Sandra Bland. You have that going on. Now what you're doing is that you've done the first thing, you enslaved us and you separated the families. When we try to come back and create families, you did the next thing by taking our concepts, which was through the Black Panthers, food for kids in school. The whole breakfast program, the whole free lunch program, that never existed when I was growing up. I had to take my own lunch. My mother had to make food for us. That didn't exist. But because we created it through the Black Panther movement, you realize that you're looking at this now, and you're the oligarchy, and you're realizing that we done incarcerated them, we have beaten them, we've raped these women, we've done terrible things to the men, we've scattered their families across the United States, and yet they're out here trying to feed our children. That is what they call psychological warfare, whether we realized it or not. That is not what they want. You must think the way they want you to think. So they stepped up all of this stuff, police brutality. That's where you got all of the police shows on television beating up Black folks. Okay. That is also where they had stepped up all of the SVU law and order stuff that dealt with sex, rape, and crime. So now you're at home watching this, because when I was growing up, TV was new. We didn't. It's not like it is now. So therefore, you are now indoctrinating the new children who are sitting in front of it, and you watch, and you realize that even with the new children sitting in front of this, they were not increasing crime, and that's the irony of it. Crime went down in the African American community. So how do you pump it up? You inject drugs in there. You do a lot of things, and you still had a lot of police officers that were criminals. They were crooked, and they did not set up a system to weed them out, because it was the wall of blue, the silence of the blue. Things are going to change because we're going to see them change, and that's what we're doing. We're seeing a change. Unfortunately, when you hit the second wave, where you're killing off again young men and women who are standing for something, standing on principle, on point, but they have tools now besides just their mouth. They have knowledge, and they're able to pull that knowledge out, and they can tell the police you're doing this wrong. They can go to court for themselves. They're speaking this knowledge. You don't need that if you're trying to have a population you can control. And you're looking at the fact that what you once only wanted were ex-slaves to remain poor and unstable. And we rose through the ranks. All right, so now that you've risen through the ranks, you're going to make sure that it was a time when the black man spoke, and that's where we had all of our black attorneys and all this kind of stuff. Now you're going to take it out of the mouth of the black woman. However, the black women you want are your Oprahs, your Gales, your Joy Reids, the Victoria woman. Then you're looking at Don Lemon and Miss Crockett here, and Cori Bush and Maxine Waters. That is what you are striving for, not Shirley Chisholm. Okay? You're not looking for that. You're looking for these black women of color who are going to go along with the transgender agenda, who are out here fighting for the fact. What is Miss Crockett saying? She's saying, you ain't going to be on the plantation. No offense, I've never been on a plantation.
And she basically tied our trauma, or what we are historical.
Right, and that's what they do.
Tied it with immigration.
Right, and that is what has been done. When we had affirmative action, it was tied. I'm sorry, everybody. It was tied to the benefit of white women, and then it became tied to the benefit of Asian people, particularly Chinese. So when they got rid of affirmative action, a lot of black folks were like, I had to go to school and pay. I didn't get the affirmative action. Yeah. I didn't get the Pell Grants. I didn't, you know what I'm saying? So we weren't always recipients of that. And I think what has happened is that as we have children and you have children, you're able to look at this and go like, ooh, here we go again. And so it has no weight. That is why they have to really step their game up. On April 5th, they were supposed to have that day. I don't know what it was called.
It was the hands-off day.
Okay, hands-off day, whatever it was. And they were mad. I remember when Joy Reid got on YouTube and said, you all can't expect black women to come out there and support you on April 5th because they're not going to do that. They're not interested in supporting the Democratic Party, out of her mouth, because we have come to a place where we have the ability to rationalize and not be a victim. So we didn't show up.
Joy Reid should have been saying that when she had a job on MSNBC. Now since they done gave her treated her like she one of us, now she acts. Now she want to get up there and speak truth to power.
And that's what we're seeing with Whoopi Goldberg and Sunny Hostin. That's what we're seeing. And the bottom line is that it always comes out like that. It always happens in that venue. So that's what it is.
Mm.
She is I agree, she's a plant, but she's also a tool. And
All
it
tools must
appears
be
that
broken.
for some reason they are looking at what we call the middle of America, and we gave them the trifecta. We gave them Maxine, Jasmine, and Corey Bush.
So this is so this is what St. Louis gave America.
This is what a St. Louis, and do you know what that does for you? This for us who live here, it they're trying to negate Dred Scott. They're trying to negate Benjamin Banneker, the Turner brothers, the Vashon brothers. Okay, Harriet Beecher Stowe. They're trying to negate all of that, and they want you to believe, "Ooh, St. Louis is just so terrible. You don't want to go there. Look at that. Look what they got." And so this is one more of their ploy. Unfortunately, in my opinion, it is not working.
It's only three. It's only three rotten fruits.
Okay. It's not working, in my opinion. That's my opinion. And I don't think it's really working with you all because I don't see. I watched Pop and Politics, which is an older group of women, and they are very political. Watch them. They talked not to denigrate her, but what I'm saying here, they were talking about the fact that they were comparing her to Cori Bush. Like, what are you doing?
I think the thing is that really with Jasmine Crockett, I know a lot of people. The last 2 months, I think I've talked about on two or three shows. I think a lot of people are trying really to give her the benefit of the doubt, and they're like, okay, she might have misspoke. We'll give her a pass. And then it's like she does it again. It's like she's doubling down on her rhetoric that doesn't make much sense. But
Mhm,
like you said, and what sometimes you have to listen to what people are really saying.
mhm.
And she's telling you that she believes she's an elitist, that she's above who she's talking about and who she's talking to. That's why she's said is y'all ain't gonna be picking cotton. Like, and sometimes we think that we can identify with her when it's perfectly fine to say that she's a daughter of St. Louis, but she's not a daughter of St. Louis.
But okay, here's something else I want you all to think about when you hear her talk. You know, if you've ever had an experience in your life where you are caught and you know you were wrong, but you don't have the ability to say that you're wrong. You double down on everything you do. In the very beginning, she was very confident. Now she's not. Do you know she's been sanctioned after she gave that hot wheel comment about Governor Abbott? I did not know Governor Abbott of Texas was disabled. And he had been disabled since he was 26 years old. Okay, so for 26 years, he's been disabled. I did not know that. That is not the first time she made a
And
derogatory
it's a party,
comment.
the Democratic Party prides itself in saying they are the party, not like it's true or not, but they like to pride themselves saying they are the party who speak up for the disadvantaged person, the disability person, the person. So it really speaks that she was actually making fun or trying to get a laugh at somebody that that party says that they represent all the time.
Mhm.
Yeah.
She reminds me of when the Republicans lost their way and no one took them serious for 4 decades. Nobody took them serious because
Yeah.
everything that came out of their mouth was a joke.
If you go back, just for everybody in the chat, if you go back in history, Sister Azim was correct. At one point in the mid 1900s, the Republicans lost almost every national election.
Hmm.
They were getting their peripheral asses kicked
Hmm.
because the American people, like she said, felt as though that they lost their way, they lost their core values
Mhm.
of what they saying was about. And if you really, really look at it, this was the time where the shift
Mhm.
changed within the Republican Party, and a lot of the people, and then with the aid of LBJ,
Mhm.
and people feeling though that this segregationist was for black people, not really understanding that he was against black people. He just got us to switch over. That
Mhm.
was like the nail on the coffin. That was the last hurrah
Mhm.
to a lot of black people leaving the Republican Party,
Mhm.
because
And
the
coming to
Republican
the different.
Party had definitely lost their way.
Mhm.
So, you guys in the chat, um, Randy calling me actually, but
Yeah.
yeah, I'm gonna call him in a minute.
Yeah, he
But
was
you,
calling me too.
you guys in the chat, me and Randy will probably try to do something tomorrow. But you guys in the chat, appreciate you guys for always joining us, and we wanted to really speak about the Pride of St. Louis, and just to give ourselves some understanding that yeah, the trifecta is there, was are from there.
Mhm.
However, the richness of the city and what it has, the fruit it has bore to us, Sister Azima and
Mhm.
others.
Mhm.
I know the brother Crow said Red Fox, Dick Gregory, countless people have
Have
came
come
from
through
that
there.
place.
Mhm.
Yeah, so understanding that that's part of what we say, Middle America,
Mhm.
the middle of the world. If
Mhm.
you look at the maps and stuff.
Mhm.
So with that, appreciate you guys in the chat. Sister Azima, any final words?
I think it would be a good time when we can start talking about what is democracy, fascism.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
We're going to start working on that because you all need to have a better understanding of what it is, what it does, and how to how to use that. And don't I want it to be clear that long before there was just Democrats and Republicans, you had the Whigs and you had all kinds of different political
So you so
parties.
you guys, I asked Sister Azima, we were gonna talk about, we're gonna go into not deep depth about what Marxism really is and
Mhm.
fascism really is, but what happened, we all know that Saturday they had this big thing across the country where a lot of cities had a lot of people, right? So I
Mhm.
happened to see a sign, and this is what made me call Sister Azima. I saw a sign, you guys, and it said, no to socialism. No, yes to socialism, no to fascism. And if you know a little bit about either one, they're the same thing.
Mhm.
If
Mhm.
you know what Mussolini
Mhm.
um, practiced, if you
Mhm.
know what Mussolini was about, and
Mhm.
Mussolini is considered the father of fascism.
Mhm.
But if you know what Mussolini was about, what he spoke about,
Mhm.
it was nothing but socialism. So
Mhm.
to have these two, and people think that they're so different,
Mhm.
they're one and the same. And Sister Azima and myself, we're gonna discuss it and really have a conversation about it. And if you guys in the chat, if you know something about it, or you got some information you want to present about either one, once we start talking about it, we have to be careful
Mhm.
because we understand that we don't own this platform, and
Mhm.
we understand that when you start speaking of this stuff, you're going to be shaking the table. And what I
Mhm.
mean by that is you're going to be attracting eyes. So if you don't want to share anything about it, it's perfectly fine. Me and Sister Azima know how to talk on these YouTube streets, so
Mhm.
we'll be able to word things the way that they need to be properly worded, and get an understanding of what this is. Because when someone says someone's a fascist or someone's a Marxist or someone's a socialist, we need to understand what they're really saying. I
Mhm.
know just 30 years ago, if you call somebody a fascist or a socialist, you automatically put a light on that person by
Mhm.
by the authorities. And now that these words are so mainstream where you even hear politicians calling each other these words, this is a scary time in the republic. So with that, we will see you guys next week. Take care and have a great week.
You too.